right. Hello and welcome to the Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. I'm your host, Dr. David Hardy. And today on our show, we've got another amazing guest. He is a marathon runner, international keynote speaker, TEDx presenter, workshop facilitator, author, and holds 6 Guinness World Records. Welcome to the show, Martin Parnell. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you. Fantastic to be here today.
Absolutely. Now, you're not just a marathon runner. You've done, 250 in one single year, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it was a long year, but it was incredible, and it was for charity. So that's the reason I did it. Was an effort to raise money for an organization called Right to Play, and the goal was 250 marathons in 1 year, 5 marathons a week, to raise $250,000 for the children's charity.
Well, you did way more than 250, didn't you?
Well, I did 250 in that 1 year. Yeah, that was 1 year. But in total, I've done 337 marathons.
Wow. No, I meant $250,000.
Oh,
You raised a lot more, haven't you?
we did, David. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, we raised $322,000 for the marathons, but over a 5 year period, doing some other challenges, including the 6 Guinness World Records, we raised $1.3 million for Right to Play.
Wow. Now, what are the Guinness World Records in?
Yes,
What
no,
have you held?
well, interesting. And some of them, they're in sports, and some of them are the sports I'd never played before. So one of them was netball, which is similar to basketball. There
Yes.
was indoor soccer, 42 hours of indoor soccer. There was hockey, ice hockey, 9 hours of ice hockey, where each with 353 players. Oh gosh, there was lacrosse. Now lacrosse was interesting. We played 24 hours of lacrosse, and I had never played lacrosse before. So I went to a high school and I did a 1 week kind of full on workshop on lacrosse. I learned lacrosse, and we set the Guinness World Record for lacrosse, the biggest 10-kilometer race, virtual during the pandemic. We did that one. And ball hockey, which we played 162 players over 6 hours. So a big variety of sports, but lots of fun. Really enjoyed it.
It would be a ton of fun, but some people would also call it absolute madness.
Yeah, I have heard that said before. So, nothing new there, Dave. Nothing new there.
Right, nothing new. But where did all this madness start, or where did the fun begin? How did you develop all of this? What was the first step?
Yeah, that's a great question. Back in 2002, I received a phone call from my younger brother Peter on a snowy December night in Sudbury, Ontario, and he challenged me to a marathon. Now,
sucker, right?
Yeah, the problem was I didn't run. And so, I said yes right away. I put the phone down, but I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I've always had a bit of a rocky relationship with sport. I was kind of known as a huggable child, fairly big lad, and I was always picked last in the sports in England, in the football and the cricket and so on, and the rugby. But mum and dad, they really supported us kids, 6 kids, through sport. But for the love of sport, not for getting on teams and winning medals and stuff, just for the enjoyment of playing sport. So I've always played a lot of sports, and I consider myself a reverse Olympian. They're generally very good at one sport, and I was rubbish at many, many, many sports. And so when I got challenged by my younger brother Peter at the age of 47, I was 47 at the time, to run a marathon, this was a big thing for me. But you can't turn down a challenge by a younger sibling. And so I started training, and my very first marathon was the Calgary Marathon in 2003. And my brother Peter was there, and also my other younger brother Andrew was at that race. So that was my very first marathon.
And were they running it with you, or did you just?
They did. Oh yes, they wanted to crush me. They wanted to take the older brother down. And so, the race started and I flew off, and things were great for about 2 kilometers. Then I stepped into a pothole, and smash. I'm on the
Oh,
ground. My knees are bleeding, my hands. And the two brothers kind of, ran by and waved, which was nice. But anyway, I managed to finish. I've managed to finish the race, and in the sibling rivalry, the youngest brother Andrew was first. I was second, and Peter was third. So I sort of held my own up.
definitely. So it all started out of,
It
well,
all
I'm going to
starts
get you,
with
bro.
sibling, yeah, younger brother, I tell you.
And as you said, the marathon didn't start out too smoothly either. So
It was
how
bad.
on how on earth did you say later, oh, I'm going to do a whole bunch of these. I'm going to do 250 in a
Well,
year.
well, it was interesting because during that period of when Peter challenged me a year prior, my wife Wendy had died of cancer,
Oh
and
no.
I was in a very dark place. Mentally, I was depressed. I had two oldest children that I was looking after, and I was lost, to be honest. But when Peter, I think it was serendipity, when Peter challenged me, I took it on, and I found that the physical exercise, and I think this relates to the what we're talking about, the brain and the body are all linked, and I found the physical exercise really helped me physically and mentally. And so that 6, 7 months of training plus the race, I felt very different. I lost a bit of weight, and mentally I felt um, clearer. It was kind of interesting, and so I really enjoyed the run. And I thought, boy, I'd like to do another one. So I phoned Peter and I said, Peter, how about we do a marathon together? He said no. He didn't want to run it. So I thought, okay, well, I'll keep going. So I ran the Toronto Waterfront Marathon, and I qualified for Boston. So I sort of found something that I could do reasonably well. And in 2:04, I ran my very first Boston Marathon, which I loved, and I kept running. But what I found was I was good at. Well, I actually have a gift, David, just to share with you.
Yes.
I can do long, slow, boring things. I'm very good at that. So I can just keep going and going. And so I ended up running more marathons. I got in triathlon and ended up doing Ironman triathlon, which is 17 hours to do that. But then I got into ultra running, which is any race over a marathon. And I got up to 100 miles, and I ran that
Wow.
in 36 hours. So it was like a day and a night continual running. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I was training for a 100-mile run. I was running 3 marathons a week. And then a friend of mine introduced me to Right to Play. And they're an organization that helps children around the world with sport. And this really kind of resonated with me because in 2:05, I did a cycle trip from Cairo to Cape Town with a group of other cyclists. 4 months, 10,000 kilometers, right across 10 countries. But what I ended up
Oh,
doing was playing a lot of
amazing.
sport. Yeah, a lot of sport with children. And so this idea of helping kids through sport, it all kind of came together. And that's where the idea, as I was training, running for this 100 miler, was to run 250 marathons in 1 year to try and raise these funds for Right to Play.
Absolutely mind blowing.
It just
Wow.
made it just made sense. I mean,
It does in hindsight, maybe.
it was obvious to me, David. Not to my wife or friends, but and family, but to me it was obvious. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that. And yeah, a lot of times barriers are put up by our surroundings, our friends, family, everything else. So you got this daunting task to do 100 miles in a day and a half there, no sleep. And you've got this audacious goal to do 250 marathons. What is the attitude behind it? Like, what, how do
Great
you get
question. I
that?
think, yeah, and that's really the key. And I've developed what I call a finish the race attitude. And
Yes.
it really is about, okay, here's the task. Now, in my mind, in the world of Martin, all right, this thing about running 250 marathons, the way I broke it down was look, I can run one marathon. And the way I run a marathon, just interestingly, is I break it down into 10-minute increments. I literally break a marathon down into running 9 minutes and walking one. So I take it down sort of to this incremental element. And then I just build on that. Okay, I'll do 10 minutes, I'll do 10 minutes more. And eventually I'll do a marathon. okay, if I can do one marathon, I can do two. So I'll do one the next day. And it really was an attitude of, look, I'm going to do my best. I don't know what's going to happen in the year of running. I mean, weather, injury, sickness, who knows what's going to happen. But I'm going to keep going as long as I can keep going. And that was my attitude. Every day I'd get up and I had a plan. I focused on doing the marathons. That was key, the planning and the focus. And I would get up, whether it was, plus 10 or minus 30. I'd have to get up and bundle up and
Ouch.
head. Oh boy, there was some tough days, David. There was some
Oh,
very cold
yes.
days. But I would go out. I had a route, and I would start doing it, and it worked well. But what happened is, after 20 marathons, which is a lot anyway, sort of the middle of February, I started getting an injury on my left leg, and we initially thought it was a stress fracture. It ended up being a repetitive strain injury, and I had to stop running
Mm.
for 2 weeks. And I thought, and this was the issue. Oh my gosh, what have I done? My big mouth. I said, I'd run 250 marathons. I've done 20, and that was a stressful time. But I managed after 2 weeks to get walking, and I actually walked myself back into fitness, which was I couldn't believe. And I managed to keep going, and I finished the last marathon on December the 31st. So 250 in that year. But it was really a case of from a finish the race attitude, just do what you can do, just keep plugging. And I think that's one of the things. Don't get overawed by the whole thing. Have a plan and just try and stick to it.
Wow. Now, did you leave 50 marathons to the last minute or just the last one?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. Yeah, that's right. So, like any plan, it was, five a week, and I'd have these two kind of rest days, and I had a medical team. I had a sports psychologist and a physiotherapist, and oh my gosh, had my family doctor was all set up. And as you indicated, things started to go awry as I got these niggly injuries, my back, my cramp in my legs, and at the end, I was doing eight in a row with one day off.
Wow.
But I will say this, and this is kind of, I think this is the mental side of it, is that as I progressed towards the end in late November, December, even though I had these marathons stacked up, I was feeling stronger and stronger. Now, I think a big part of that was I was conditioned, which was great, but also mentally, coming to the end, I knew I had to stay focused to get finished, and I coming towards the end, I managed to keep going in a pretty solid way. So
Sounds like you just, yeah.
once I was done though, that was it. That day
That was
after,
it, right?
on January the 1st, that was enough of that. So, but it was it was a very interesting year. I learned a lot. I ended up running just I didn't run all at official marathons. That wouldn't have been possible. So I ran at 7 official marathons, including Boston and Vegas and so on. But also I ran at 60 schools. So every Thursday I'd go to a school and I'd talk about right to play and about the kids, helping the kids. Then I'd go outside and run around their soccer field 100 times.
Ah,
Around and around. So I'd go in the morning, and the kids would join me for 2 loops. So they'd join me for a couple of loops, then they'd go into class, and they would wave at me from the window as I was running. Lunchtime, they'd come out again and run two more loops with me, but they would give me like apples and carrots and Snickers bars. Like I was like a running guinea pig. I was their pet. I was their pet for the day, David. Yeah. So I do that, and then they go back in the afternoon. I keep going, and at the very end of the day, I would do my final 2 loops for the marathon, and they would join me. And what blew me away was once I had finished the marathon, they would give me their loony and toony pocket money to help the other children because they really
no
understood.
way.
They
Wow.
really understood, how lucky they were and how they could help other children with their little bit of pocket money. So that was the highlight. I could have the worst week ever. But when I went Thursday, when I went to a school, and I ended up running 60 schools with from kindergarten to grade 12 with 60,000 students.
Wow.
So it
And
was
what
amazing.
was
It
the
was
reaction from maybe the different age groups then too?
They were fantastic. They were
Yeah.
all, they had a different understanding of what I was doing. The kindergartens just wanted to talk about my cat and my dog and stuff like that. But of course, the older students wanted to know about the other children in the developing countries and the challenges they had. And also the older students, one thing I did learn is they have challenges of their own and they wanted to
Yes.
talk about. It's funny when you're moving and you're talking rather than just sitting in a classroom. When you're moving, they seem to be much more open to talk about their challenges and what they worried about. And so it was, it was a really good conversation both ways.
And after that, you were even more inspired then. You
Yeah,
didn't stop.
well, I took a break,
Yeah,
but
little break there,
a little
but
break, yeah, a little break.
yeah,
But Sue
you
knows that I
kept on
need goals.
running.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Sue knows that I need goals. So she said, Martin, okay, you need to do something because I mean, you've been lying around here for a couple of weeks, so you need to get going. So I ended up booking myself into a race called the Comrades, which is a big race in South Africa. And I ended up going to South Africa and running this 87 kilometer, actually they call it a marathon, it's 87 kilometers. And I did that, and I also visited, I went to Benin in West Africa to visit Right to Play's program there. So I kind of did a bit of work over there. But I started thinking that, I'd like to do more to give back. And I came up with this idea of doing 10 quests in 5 years to try and raise $1 million to help Right to Play. And that's another journey where that was part of the Guinness World Records, was part of the 10.
Ah,
Also climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in 24 hours was
yes.
another one. And the idea was, David, each one was sort of it was a fundraiser, but it had to really have a hook. It had to be something a bit different. So that's why, trying to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with two of my friends in 24 hours, also running the coast of England for a marathon a day for a month. So these different type of quests that I had decided to try and do. And at the end of the 5 year period, they were completed, which was great. And we raised over, well, $1.3 million for Right to Play. So, I mean, that was a
Wow.
big undertaking. That was a huge undertaking.
Now, what have you seen with the funds that you've raised then?
Well, with Right to
I'm sure you're
Play,
very involved in seeing it implemented and
yeah, well,
and getting
what I like about Right to
that
Play, and they're
feedback.
based in Toronto, is that they have developed play based programs to teach children life skills like leadership, team building, conflict resolution. So it's really kind of it's the kids think they're having fun, but actually they're learning as well, which is, I think, what it's all about. And $50 gives the children a child a Right to Play program for 1 year.
Oh,
So
okay.
so the beauty was I knew that over 25,000 children would get that gift of play for that particular year around the world, and they're in 17 countries. So I could see firsthand. When I went to Benin and visited Benin, I visited with two Olympians. Olympians do support Right to Play. Heather Moyes and Caroline Ouellette, the hockey player, and Heather Moyes, the bobslayer. And we went to visit.
Bobslayer, rugby player.
I know
She's got what,
Heather's
like three
amazing.
gold medals,
She
like
is
three medals.
amazing. So
Yeah.
yes, I was lucky to spend time with them and also spend time with the kids and saw the programs in action. And so it's just a phenomenal thing I mean, all kids need to play. I'll talk about
Yes.
Afghanistan in a minute. I went there and I went to a playground and the kids just want to play. And I think that's one thing that we need more of. We need to get kids outside playing, and
Absolutely.
get them off those devices. I'm sorry, I'm just enough's enough. Get some fresh air.
Yes.
Go out, go into the woods, go into the fields. I don't know, find a playground. I don't care, but get out there, and that's what Right to Play does.
I love it. And yeah, I'm a former teacher. I taught in Australia, Japan, Canada, and
Oh
then
wow,
also I'm on the clinical side of things.
yeah. Well, this is it.
And
You can. I mean,
wow,
it's just so.
everyone's saying the same thing. Kids need to
Yeah,
get out and do stuff. Like,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
that's just my beating my drum, and I'll keep doing that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, how about Afghanistan? Because a lot of people are
Yeah.
saying, well, I would not travel there. That's not on my list. And
No, I'm surprised, David. I thought that would be
oh,
no.
no, I would.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, well, it was never, David. It was never on my list. I tell you that right now. I finished 2014. I had finished the 5 years, the 10 quests, and we had raised the money, and I was taking another break. Can you believe it? Another rest after that. And but what happened was I was very much getting into my professional speaking career, and I
Right.
was speaking at a number of conferences, conventions about what I'd done with the quests and so on. And I was getting ready to go to Winnipeg to talk at a conference there. But the week before, this was in let's say this was in February of 2015, and I wasn't feeling very good. I had a really bad migraine headache. Saw my doctor, and he said, "Well, look, Martin, take some Tylenol, and when you come back from the conference, let's check it out. Maybe there's something else." So I said, "Okay." So I flew to the conference, and oh, my head was just pounding, David. And the conference organizer Suzanne said, "Martin, you look terrible." I thought, okay, well, that's not
Oh,
good.
wow. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. She said, okay, I'm going to take you to the Grace Hospital in Winnipeg. So she drove me to the Grace Hospital. We went into the emergency ward. They took me right in, and they did a CAT scan. And half an hour later, they said, Martin, we're taking you into emergency. You have a massive clot on the brain, right across the thrombus, sinus thrombus canal here. And they said, you have to go in. They put me in, and they put me into an induced coma for 24 hours. They
Wow.
phoned Sue back here in Cochrane and said, Sue was thinking, oh, it's Martin phoning. He'll be leaving soon. Instead, it was from a nurse, get here right now. We're not sure if Martin's going to make it. So Sue came out to Winnipeg, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And this is a very unusual diagnosis. It's very rare, 1 in a million. And as I say, it's the plugging of the the sinus thrombus canal right across here, David. And so I ended up being on a cocktail of drugs. I suddenly, from doing all those marathons, I had to. I couldn't do anything. In fact, I needed help to go from my hospital bed to the washroom, just 20 feet away. I could hardly get there, and so 2 weeks I was in the hospital. Eventually, they said, Martin, you can come, back. You can come back to Calgary, which I did. But I was just sitting on my couch, literally just looking out the window. I was sleeping 18 hours a day. Yeah, everything had turned upside down, and the recovery ended up being a year recovery from that. But during the recovery, Sue gave me a copy of a newspaper, the Guardian newspaper, and it talked about the very first running of the Marathon of Afghanistan. But it talked about a particular person. Her name was Zainab, and she was the very first Afghan woman to run that race.
Oh,
There were 60
wow.
runners, 60 runners, 10 international, and the other 50 were Afghan men except for Zainab. I thought, oh my gosh, that's incredible. Then I read her story, and there was like a light switch went on because it talked about the challenges. And normally, for me, I knew it was the weather or hydration or whatever. For Zainab, it was men yelling at her, calling her a prostitute, and throwing stones at her to stop her running because she was
Whoa.
a female. Yeah, uh, just because she was a female. But what she did is she went back to her home, and she went into her walled garden and ran around and around and around inside her walled garden to train. And on the day she went to the race and she ran the race. And to be honest, David, it was, I think, partly because I was recovering. I was not feeling great. I was kind of mad when I read this article about her and how unfair it was. And I said to Sue, if I get better, if I can run again, and if I can run a marathon again, then I'm going to go over to Afghanistan and support Zainab in her efforts to run and also support the women. And a year later, I was on a flight from Calgary to Istanbul to Kabul.
Wow.
As you do, David.
As you do. You
As you
get
do.
this idea and you go
I
for it.
know
I
it's a little
love
bit.
it.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit, but that was a big effort trying to get over, trying to get the visa. Obviously, there was concerns, security concerns, and so on. But we did it, and we took a film crew with us, and that was
Wow.
amazing. We made the film, the Secret Marathon film.
And on that all of this, just an incredible journey. Kind of walk us through though, after being so athletic and doing all these things, what the rehab process was like, and how did that lead into the motivation then of the next one?
Yeah, it was. Well, I think a couple of things. I think this is where goals, for me in particular, are very important to have a goal, and that allows me and motivates me, or whatever you want to say, to keep moving. In this particular case, I was in rehab, and the key was walking. So the key rehab for this situation I was in was to get out and get moving, get the blood moving,
Yes.
and get the legs going. And so initially, I would walk from my home 100 meters down the road to the post box and back, and I did that for a month and a half. And but then I
So,
started.
so during any of that time, were you like overly frustrated? Like,
Oh,
wow,
I was
I
just.
did 100 miles and now 100 meters is
I
kicking
was
my
I
butt.
was just totally frustrated. However, what I did was I channeled that frustration into action.
Excellent.
Okay, and the action I took was I started off with a little bit of walking, but in my mind, and I talked to Sue about this, walking was going to be the answer. That was where I was going to put my effort, and I ended up walking in a fairly short time, 8 kilometers a day. So I kind of jacked it up quite quickly with Sue, and so that was good because again I would be tired physically and not from the drugs. And
Yes.
so over, week after week, month after month, I'd just be walking, walking, walking. And then when I read about Zanab and I set this goal, well, then I thought, okay, I'm going to walk. Now I'll start running. In fact, my first event was the Calgary Marathon, but not the marathon, the 5K walk. So I did that, and that was great. And so again, I started setting little goals. I started running and walking and slowly building up. And I set a plan such that I could run the Calgary Marathon that following year. And if I could do that, then I would go to Afghanistan. So it was all about setting these little goals along the way, David, and not just getting down, but taking some action. And I think again that was very important for me.
Yeah. And like working with people who are in neuro rehab, it just floors me. These people are training like professional athletes or harder, and you've done both. And on top of that, you've also got this big audacious goal for humanitarian reasons as well that moves you forward with this. So when you landed in Afghanistan, what was it like for you?
Well, it was I mean, it may sound obvious, but it was a different world. So we land in Kabul, and the good thing was, and I wasn't going to do this on my own. I had signed up with a group called Untamed Borders, and they're an organization that takes people on trips to countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and they were highly recommended. And so I was under the auspices. I was literally under the wing of Untamed Borders, and they looked at the moment I arrived, and also our co-director of the film, Kate McKenzie, who had come with a film crew. They took us under their wing, and so really we followed all their instructions. They said, keep under the radar. We'll go here, we won't go there, and that's the only way we could have done
Right.
that.
So
And
how do you
so,
keep under the radar with running marathons with a whole bunch of people?
well, so this is where it gets very interesting. And again, Afghanistan's got a tumultuous history. Even now, and we can touch
Yes.
on that. It's just horrendous in terms of the way women and girls are dealt with over there. But at the time, it was under a government control. There were still obviously huge issues with the terrorists, with the Taliban. But there is a place in Afghanistan called Bamiyan, which is in the foothills of the Hindu Kush Mountains, and they happen to be a province that were very pro women and girls. So it was the one place. And again, I think this is one thing we learn about countries. We hear about Afghanistan or certain countries. And quite frankly, we don't really know
We don't.
more granular what's going on. So this was a place where we were welcome. We couldn't talk about the date of the event or the route, and that's why we called it the Secret Marathon. And the film,
Ah,
that's the name of the film, yeah, because we were not allowed to talk about anything on social media, and even when we got to Barmian, we could not talk about the date or the route until the day before. And so the day before, we were told where it is. So that's the security side of it. and that's how we could even manage to do it. There was 100 runners in the marathon. This time there were 6 Afghan women
Oh,
rather than
excellent.
one. Yeah, so it started to grow. But also there was a 10K where there was 150 runners, of which 100 were Afghan schoolgirls. So at the time, there was some hope. There was some promise of things were improving. And in fact, the following years, the number of women went up to 12 to 24 until August 2017. Sorry, 2021, when the Taliban took over. And it's been 3 years, three plus years now. So
Hmm. So would you go back and do another one?
I would absolutely, but I'm not going to go back, and I could go back. The problem is
Yes.
at the moment because of the regime, which is very much anti-women and girls. I'm not going to go back, but I am working with a group of Afghan women in Kabul. I'm a Rotary member. I've been a Rotarian for 13 years, and we've recently set up a online club called the Rotaract E-Club for Peace and Education. And of the 20 members, 18 are Afghan women. And so every 2 weeks we have a meeting and we talk about their hopes and desires, and hopefully we can, keep them engaged during this very difficult time.
Yes. Wow. Now, you might need a sequel to your book lineup here too. So you mentioned the Secret Marathon as a documentary, but you've also written this as a book and 2 others, correct? And all these
That's
stories are found in these 3 books and
That's right,
more.
David. Yeah, yeah. I figured, well, if I'm going to do this, let's give writing a book a go. So I've got the 3 books: Marathon Quest, which starts off with my running career and the 250 marathons, and then Running to the Edge, which is the 5 years and the 10 quests, and then the Secret Marathon, which is the trip to Afghanistan. In fact, I went twice. I went back in went to 2016 and 2018, and ran marathon with the women and girls there. So it's been and there's stories. It's just stories, and but a lot of it does link with having a finish the race attitude, is having that goal and then just looking at a way of doing it, of just getting it done.
Yes. Wow. So on that point, is there any other advice for people listening in? How do they take that first step or make things happen?
Well, I think think about what you enjoy, what you might like to try. Don't
Yes.
get overawed. Pick a goal and start thinking, okay, how can I start working at this? How can I break it down into doable chunks? Do the planning, start looking at that, talk to people, get support, and then you make a commitment. Once you start doing the goal, heading towards the goal, don't get knocked offline where, oh, I didn't do it for that one day. I'm rubbish. It's no good. I can't do it. Okay, these things happen. I mean, don't sweat it, but don't leave it too long. Okay, keep plugging away. And also, once you've achieved your goal, or even if you don't achieve it, I mean, one of my favorite sayings is by Nelson Mandela: "I never lose. I either win or learn." And so,
Right.
what did you learn doing it? And also celebrate along the way. So important. Don't keep grinding it through. Celebrate. Have a coffee chino and a a Danish or something, and but do celebrate with friends as well. So I think a lot of it is just plugging away. But the key is do it now. All right, start
Yes.
something now. It's easy to procrastinate and so on, but just start something, and it's surprising where it will lead you, David. I tell you,
Absolutely. And it can take you around the world
it can take you
and
take you to places you never even knew about. So
yeah. Now, on that, for motivation and also stories of when you get stuck, and I know you've got a couple good ones of how you failed forward as well. How do people find these and get more information about you? Where do they go?
well, absolutely. So they can go to my website. I think that's probably a good place to start. www.martinparnell.com. There you can find, there's a couple of films there, there's articles, there's all sorts of resources there. So do start there. To get my book, they can get The Secret Marathon on Amazon, amazon.ca, amazon.com. So you pick the book there. Or, contact me directly if you want to have a chat. Info@martinprinelle.com. I'm a professional speaker. I do a workshop on goal setting. So I'm always happy to chat. We met the other day and at the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. And I
Yes,
always love to go for a coffee and have a chat. So, don't be a stranger, reach out.
absolutely. So definitely reach out to Martin and stay tuned to the next episode of The Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. Take care.
Thanks, David.